Welcome to ATD, the All Things Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Merel. Welcome to the All Things Divorce podcast. This is season 1, episode 3. I'm your host, Jonathan Merel, divorce lawyer, owner of Merel Family Law. I am very excited about today's episode. We've had a couple different guests on in the past. They were both great when it came to Melissa and Mitch. Really excited about this week because I think we have what I believe is one of the most important hires that this firm has ever made. And I think it's a groundbreaking hire, not for the firm, but really the family law industry as a whole. And I'm not just talking locally, I'm talking nationwide, worldwide. At Merel Family Law, we are one of, if not the only family law firm that has an in-house divorce coach. And I'm happy to introduce today our special guest, our in-house divorce coach here at Merel Family Law, Kristina Lindsay. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you're here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. We can get into obviously how you joined the firm and how I basically stalked you until you would talk to me on Instagram, and finally here we are today. But tell us about your background, how your career started and how you got to where we are today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to be here. I started out as a certified domestic violence professional. I've had that qualification since 2016, working in the legal system, in the court system, assisting survivors in obtaining orders of protection. I've also worked in the hospital systems with survivors as well. Really, the common thread that I saw there that was linking all of this together is post-separation abuse. A lot of survivors were experiencing that, and there was just this vast emptiness in terms of information and support for them.
Right.
So through that, I obtained my certification as a high conflict divorce coach, started my own practice, and then have
Here
happily
we
found
are.
myself here at
Here we are.
Family Law. Yes.
So to our audience, a lot of people, they're not necessarily familiar with what a divorce
Right.
coach is. You might have heard the term. Even today, people don't necessarily know what a divorce coach is, does, the training. You are a certified divorce coach. And while you
Yes.
touched on, obviously, the aspects of domestic violence, which you've specialized in, divorce coaches don't necessarily just deal with domestic violence.
Correct.
They deal with really helping someone go through a divorce when it comes to knowing how it goes, the
Mhm.
emotional impact. But I guess
Right.
my question to you is, what is a divorce coach to
Sure.
people that don't know?
Absolutely. It's a great question because it is a newer field. It is recognized by the American Bar Association and it's burgeoning. I think that really what we're doing here is really the way of the future. But what a divorce coach does is really we're an expert guide to walk alongside somebody in the process, help keep them focused. A lot of our clients, one of the most important things on their mind, in addition to safety and how their children are going to cope, is the financial piece of it, really.
Of
And we can
course.
really be there to help take some of the burden off of the attorneys in terms of that emotional load that a lot of clients are going to have.
Yes, that's huge.
Yeah, and we work on boundaries, we work on co-parenting, different strategies and communication, as you know.
Right.
That's half the battle.
Yeah,
Is
I mean, you cover so much, and since obviously having you on, you joined the firm last year. I've been educated so much about what you're capable of, and I mean, just a little background about how all this came about. As someone who has owned and run a family law firm for 16 years now, I was always like, obviously, lawyers that go through or that do family law, they wear their lawyer hat, but we're also required to put on like our, not therapist, but like essentially a
right.
therapist hat.
Absolutely.
And, I don't think lawyers and law firms that do family law are necessarily trained enough to deal with the emotional aspect of divorce, the part of divorce that isn't the legal part of it.
Right.
Because while we are helping people get through a process that deals
Mhm.
with finances and children,
Mhm.
we're often left to, you know, deal with the emotional aspect of it. And divorce lawyers are not trained to do that.
Right. That
So
can
I
be
was,
really taxing.
yeah, and I was always looking to fill that void. Like, why should this just be attorneys that these people are
Mhm.
turning to
Right.
when these clients can have another resource built into our law firm, which is
Right.
why I thought, wow, divorce coach sounds perfect.
Right.
So, I was scouring LinkedIn for the right person. I came across you. You live, nearby in the Chicago area, which fit perfectly. And obviously, we started talking, and the rest is history. But I guess
Mhm.
what I've learned, and tell me if you agree, is
Mhm.
not only are you an amazing resource for our clients who have someone to talk to, but for as a divorce lawyer to be able to collaborate with someone like you in house,
Mhm.
and like the two of us to be able to help our
Right.
clients together has been
Right.
amazing.
Yeah, I think it's a bridging a gap, right? There's a lot of knowledge that I might bring to the table in terms of trauma informed care, the
Of
dynamics of
course.
domestic abuse, and really the mindset of a client. So I'll spend a lot of that time with the client, and they might be disclosing things to me that they're not necessarily telling their attorney. And so I'm able to then fill the gaps
Yes.
with you, and then you all provide the excellent legal
Yeah, I
strategy.
mean, it really has been it just makes complete
Yeah.
sense. And, obviously as we've gotten you more involved with our clients, it's just made more sense how
Mhm.
natural the relationship feels. And I can tell you firsthand, like our clients have been so thrilled to work with you. And we've actually had people calling about, the fact that they're so interested in our firm because we offer this. I just think as far as family law as a whole is concerned, and you touched on this earlier before, this has to be the future. I mean,
Right.
why wouldn't
Right.
law firms have someone like
Right.
you involved? Not necessarily as someone who's like, an outside third party, but
Mhm.
you're as integral a part of the representation and the experience of a divorce and helping clients as an attorney. Don't you agree?
Right, right. And I think it's really invaluable and it makes so much sense because it's really the most intimate part of somebody's life. It's their marriage, it's their finances, their children. And
Yes,
there's going to be an emotional toll to that honestly is just a huge ask of a family law
of
attorney.
course.
And you guys all do a great job, honestly, with the
Thank you.
compassion levels
Well,
that I
you
see
you you
here is
obviously help with
huge.
that. But another thing that you and I have talked about, it's not necessarily just people who are going through the divorce. Like
Mhm.
we've had a lot of conversations with people who are considering the next
The
step of
contemplation
divorce.
phase.
And
Yes.
we've
Yeah.
touched on that before, but
Mhm.
you've talked to a ton of people who,
Right.
whether they've gone through years and years of abuse or are
Mhm.
dealing with a narcissist,
Right,
you're a great resource for them. And you've talked to a bunch of people who,
right.
we're not making the decision for them or
No,
forcing them to get
no.
divorced, but you're
Yeah.
giving a perspective that lawyers in consulting with potential
Mhm.
clients don't necessarily give.
Right. And if you think about it, it's just natural when you are contemplating divorce. It's not usually just like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it now. It takes time.
Right.
And so having somebody that a client can bounce that off of, and I really do understand those dynamics that are in play when there is a narcissist or some type of coercive control. I think it's really important. And I always really center it back to my work as a domestic violence advocate, too. And knowing that it takes the average survivor 7 different attempts to leave. And so
Yeah.
if you kind of
That's
go
crazy.
in with that mindset when you're working with people, the odds are they will be back. If
Right.
they're not back, tomorrow, it might be a month, it might be a year, but
That is a
they'll
crazy
be back.
stat.
Mhm.
6, 7 times for the
7
average
times. Yeah.
survivor to leave.
There's a
That's
lot of barriers for
it's a
people.
crazy stat, and it's actually horribly sad if you
Yeah.
think about it.
It is. It is.
Well, look, we got a bunch of stuff to get into. I know we've talked already, but obviously we deal with a lot of high conflict divorces here.
Right.
And whether that be through, like I mentioned before, narcissists, abusers, drug users, usually when people are getting divorced, it doesn't always have to be a horrible situation, but
Right.
oftentimes we deal with situations that become extremely high conflict, volatile. I
Right.
guess for our audience out there, what do you define as a high conflict divorce, and how does a high conflict divorce differ from like your regular divorce?
Right. I think, you do have your percentages of divorces that are, fairly agreeable. People can come to the table and really put the interests of the children first and that's fantastic. I think what we see a lot of, and even if a divorce might not be traditionally high conflict, it might feel high conflict for a small period of time, let's say, and then things can smooth out. For the other portion of it though, that are truly high conflict, what we're really seeing is post-separation abuse. That's really the hallmark of a high conflict divorce. So what that means is that definitely if there's been abuse in the relationship, and it really could be coercive control,
Mhm.
which is kind of I think of it as like the foundation of the relationship where there's gaslighting, manipulation, insults, isolation from family and friends, and just a fear that is instilled in the abused person
Yeah.
where they, you know, have to toe the line. They're not free in the way that you or I may be free.
Right.
And so that then translates into post separation abuse. And so what we see are, somebody utilizing the legal system in a vexatious way or
Right.
not following court orders. They might ramp up stalking, harassment, using the children as pawns,
Yeah.
false claims of parental
So all
alienation,
these things
all of
make
it.
up what are part of a high conflict divorce.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, just going back to the abuse thing, I mean, you and I have talked to people, and I mean, as anyone who's practiced divorce law or have done what you've done in domestic violence, it's just really shocking at how hard it is for people who are victims of abuse,
Right.
how hard it is for them to leave. I
Right.
mean, as an attorney, and obviously you and I talking to people, just the horrible, horrible situations that people are in that
Mhm.
to an outsider who's in, hopefully a healthy, life and marriage and
Right.
relationships, to look at these people and what they go through and the fact that they still often even sympathize with the abuser. I
Right.
mean, that is
Right.
just, it's so sad.
Right.
And I'm sure you've seen it a
Right.
million times.
Yeah, there's a trauma bonding that happens there where, and then also if somebody is truly afraid for their life, it's really hard to separate out and see leaving as a viable option. And really, I want to highlight financial abuse because that's one of the main things and the
Tons.
main barriers that I know you've seen
Mhm.
over and over where it makes it really difficult for people to leave.
Yeah. All right, getting to my next question. Obviously, you work a ton in domestic violence. What's your thoughts on how the court system itself? Obviously, no court system, no justice system is perfect. But when it
Right.
comes to the issues of protecting victims of domestic violence, or even both sides, I mean, people manipulating the system
Mhm.
to put innocent people in bad
Right.
situations, which I've seen. I guess
Yep.
what are your thoughts on how the system itself um, works and where it fails when it comes to the issues of domestic violence?
Right. I think, we have had the progress, right, in Cook County having the domestic violence division. That's a great
Sure,
thing, right?
of course.
In some ways, it's almost prolonged that separation or capitalized on that separation of family court really not being the avenue or being comfortable for people to express the domestic violence that's happened to them.
Right.
And when you're thinking about family court, I mean, intimate partner violence, family violence, it's
Sure.
all kind of goes hand in hand and is really difficult to separate. So that's one of the ways. And then I think the biggest way probably is the idea, which is false idea, that someone who has abused their partner, that has no implication on how they're going to parent. That
Right.
they're still going to be a fantastic parent, and that bond is, more important for the parent versus like the children's safety. I think
Mhm.
that's where we find a lot of issues.
Yeah. And again, just to touch on the other side, of course, like domestic violence division is huge. And the vast majority of cases, um, you have someone being protected. What's
Right.
unfortunate on the flip side that I alluded to before, sometimes people take advantage of the system
Hmm.
when it comes to
Yeah.
orders of protection. I mean, I've seen people, obviously you have the right to go in and seek an order of
Right.
protection without informing the other side. And while that's, of course, necessary and crucial to protecting people from abusers, you've seen people
Absolutely.
manipulate it, and even the person doing the abusing even go in and get an order of protection. A person who's
Absolutely.
being abused, next thing you know,
Yep.
they're served with an order of protection, a divorce, they're kicked out of their house, and
Right.
someone who might have been the primary
Right.
caretaker of the kids
Yep.
can't see their kids for 3 weeks, which
Absolutely.
is terrifying. And
I
unfortunately,
know.
there's always going to be bad actors. And of course,
Yes.
orders of protection and the DVA does more good than it
Mhm.
does harm, but it's unfortunate that we see things like that come up as
Yes.
well.
Yes. When I was a legal advocate, we had these little cubicles and we had both parties and we realized both parties were there and we're like, we got to separate them. So it
Right.
definitely happens. I like to say I have a sixth sense on this stuff
I'm
from all
sure
my
you do.
screening I've
I'm
done.
sure you do. All right, let's go in talking about a little safety and strategy.
Sure.
You're certified in lethality risk
Yes.
assessment.
Yes.
And why don't you explain, what that is and what are the warning signs that a divorce could go from regular to dangerous?
Right. So, yes, I am a certified assessor in the danger assessment, which is a weighted lethality risk assessment tool. It was developed out of Johns Hopkins and it's used in hospitals by law enforcement. My dream is to see it used in family court because it is a great tool.
Yeah,
So,
tell us what that is. Like, how
yeah.
does it work? Because I
Yes.
think
So,
most people don't understand. Even divorce lawyers, I don't think understand.
sure. So, it's basically a list of questions. It's been research based. So, they're weighted. So, to become an assessor, you have to do training and then you get access to this online system where it's a list of questions that you're going to ask your client. You're asking them if they've disclosed something that's leading you to believe that maybe their life is at risk. So, we're looking for things such as strangulation. That's a huge
Oh
one.
my gosh.
And we know so many people who've experienced that who don't go to police.
Yeah.
It's really considered one of the perfect crime for an abuser because there's a lot of hidden homicides that occur with that. But we know that if a client has experienced that, that they're 750 times more likely to be murdered by that partner. And if there's a firearm, that risk goes up to 1100% more of
Wow.
a risk. So definitely I'm looking for that. And because I'm trauma informed, like most people aren't coming and saying, hey, I was strangled.
Right.
They're
You have
saying
to get it.
choked or, there's other ways to kind of get that out. But I'm
Right.
looking for firearms. I'm looking if they have children not in common, co-occurring addiction, and then the over enmeshment is a really big one. So when you have a client say, he sees me as property, the children are pawns, those are all signs that someone's life might be at risk.
Yeah, I mean, they really should. I mean, these are terms that regular family law attorneys don't really hear in the context of divorce and dealing with
Mhm.
custody disputes. I mean, yes,
Mhm.
obviously that's heavily, I'm sure, discussed and talked about in domestic violence courts, but hasn't made a huge amount of headway. And I
Right.
mean, a lot of these terms are foreign to
Mhm.
me and probably my colleagues, I assume. And you'd think they'd come more into play, especially when you have cases that involve domestic violence that turn
Mhm.
into ultimately experts doing custody evaluations.
Right.
And
Right.
they do a lot of psychological testing, but there's not really these
Mhm.
lethality scales, which would of course have a huge impact
Right.
on custody determinations. But you would think it would make
Think.
more of an appearance and make more headway in family law,
Mhm.
but we just haven't seen it.
I would love that. And I think one of the reasons is that, they're deciding custody and everything like that versus really looking at the abuse that's happened to the partner.
Right.
And we know that you can't really separate that out.
Sure. All right. Keeping on the same safety and making sure, clients are, dealing with the abuse appropriately. How do you help clients safety plan? We hear a lot about a safety plans
Yeah.
when it comes to agencies like DCFS and Child Protective Services, but when you're giving advice to
Mhm.
victims and, perhaps this is, without a divorce pending or in the middle of a divorce or at the
Mhm.
outset of a divorce,
Yeah.
how do you help them safety plan and, how does it get tricky when there are children involved?
Yeah. So it's really an essential component to everything I do. I come to pretty much every session because honestly, most of my clients are experiencing some type of concern. With that in mind, and it's just part and parcel of what I do. So I'm going to ask them questions about different things going on. A lot of things that we see an uptick in would be like electronic monitoring, GPS monitoring. I've had clients where, the Apple AirTag is under the car seat. And
That's smart.
yeah, and a baby monitor in the vent listening.
Right.
There's always things going on, or a partner, let's say, who won't change the Wi-Fi password. They're real reluctant. It's tips to go in, take your phone, get a factory reset done. Did the person have access to your devices? If you find something, what do? You don't rip it out because then it
Right.
notifies them that you found it. So we kind of go through all of those different things. It's of course different if someone's in the home with the person. It's avoid the bathrooms, avoid the kitchens. Those are, hard surfaces, knives, things like that. But when we're bringing children into it too, in terms of this, we're thinking about the big things like where are exchanges taking place? Is it curbside? Does it need to be at a police station? How are we going to give children agency? One of my passions is the rights of children
Of course.
and the right that children have to be safe and free from abuse. And so I really work with my protective parents on coming up with different ways, depending on the age of the children, to try to develop agency for the kids. Is it getting them that smartphone? Do they have a
Right.
gizmo watch? Like, what are we going to do to
Right.
do small things so that they can have a bit of a safety net?
And it's crazy. You touched on technology and you really hit on it yourself. Technology, when it comes to this, can really be a double-edged sword. While
Yeah.
it'll, can of course protect
Hmm.
children, give them access
Yep.
to, to the other parent that they're not with, or
Yeah.
having, the ability of a parent to see where the kids are, or always kind of be able
Mhm.
to reach out to them. On the flip side,
Yep.
it allows that control, that stalking element, that
Hmm.
tracking every move, seeing where everybody is. I mean, and
Right.
I've seen tons of divorce cases where someone's put a GPS
Yeah.
tracker on someone's car because
Hmm.
they think they're cheating. I mean, while again, technology's great, it could also be used for the wrong purposes, which,
Right.
can result in more stalking, more abuse, and
Right.
more control that couldn't be exhibited, 10, 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that's something that, we always have seen. And again, with technology being a good thing for the most part, it could also be used to
Right.
really do some creepy things when someone is a controlling, abusive person.
Absolutely.
All right, our last segment, we're going to talk about empowerment, trauma informed healing. You use a trauma informed approach. Why is this critical, especially for high conflict divorce clients?
Right. It's just a fantastic way to approach cases. Being trauma informed really means thinking about, in the old way it was what's wrong with you, and now it's what happened to you. So, the fact we're honoring that people have walked through a lot of trauma when they're coming to us, it really allows me to be able to understand where our clients are coming from and be able to empower them. And really, from a non judgmental point of view, I think that's really essential. I also help people to normalize their feelings. A lot of times they might feel, I get told all the time, I feel like I'm crazy, or I don't think this is as bad. What happened to me? Is it bad? And being able to kind of say, that's a coping mechanism. It's no, people normalize abuse when you're living in it as a way to survive it.
Right.
And so kind of understanding that and giving people that foundation that we're in this together, we're going to work together to get you to that next point is really
Yeah.
essential.
And that's crucial. I mean, again, the fact that my firm has you as a resource and is part of the firm is it I can't even tell you all the reasons why it's great and why it works, because I mean, just something else you just talked about. I mean, when people come to talk to lawyers, they can get intimidated. I talked to thousands of people over my career, and sure, some are quick to open up, but like those
Yeah.
people where, lawyers ultimately get this sixth sense, like
Mm.
something's off here, and you're
Right.
trying to kind of dig and dig as a lawyer just to kind of
Mhm.
get the facts, but you're kind of not, you can tell the person's kind of closing up. You obviously have the skills, and I think people are more comfortable with you because you're not an attorney, that
Mhm.
it's much easier for them to,
Right.
kind of divulge things that they might have been embarrassed or scared to talk about.
Right.
And, that's why I love having you in on intakes. And then ultimately the client will schedule another session with you
Right.
that, often lends us much more information. And by collaborating together, it's just so much more helpful. That's what I think is
Yeah.
great.
I think it's fantastic too. The PTSD element, we do have a lot of clients that come in with that, and that can result in, executive functioning being a little bit off. Maybe it's really difficult to get that FA completed, and I can help kind of bridge that gap and like,
For
let's
sure.
set these goals so that you can get these materials over to your attorney
For sure. And
and get the
again,
case moving.
divorce coaching, we've talked a lot about dealing with domestic violence, the emotional aspect of it. There's more to it. Like, how divorce cases go, how to, tell people to get prepared for a court
Mhm.
appearance or a
Right.
deposition, even
Right.
down to like what you should wear, things you should be
Mhm.
thinking about,
Right.
how to kind of control your emotions if you're on the witness stand. Again, things that overlap with, lawyers preparing people for court appearances and testimony, but you bring a different aspect to it that I think clients are just comfortable talking to you about things. So it's not just the domestic violence, it's not
Right.
just the emotional impact,
Right.
which of course is a ton of it, but it's
Right.
those other parts of the process that you can help
Right.
them with.
Yes, and it's super important. It's like correspondence with your ex.
Right.
Super difficult. One of my
Exactly.
secret weapons is, drafting correspondence for OFW for our clients. And
Exactly.
it takes that emotional burden off and really can just allow for someone to set boundaries, to feel more in control, and ultimately focus forward. Because that's always my goal. Where are
Exactly.
we going to be in 6 months? Where are we going to be in 5 years? Like,
Right.
we're looking positive, we're looking ahead.
Exactly. All right. Well, we've talked about some amazing topics. I think we covered top to bottom everything that comes with a divorce coach, how it relates to things you're doing with our firm. Obviously, to wrap things up, it's just really been a godsend to have you here, to have you join the firm, to really be the pioneers in the family law industry when it comes to really progressively moving the field ahead from a family law standpoint, from a legal standpoint in general. I just think this is the next frontier when it comes to family law and dealing with clients who are going through horrible times. It's not just about lawyer and client, it's about dealing with more than that. We know people are going through more than just the legal battle, they're going through the battle in their minds. That's where you come in. You bridge the gap for us, it helps the client. It's really just a perfect marriage, no pun intended. But it's been great to have you on. Obviously, if you want to reach us, Kristina Lindsay, she's on LinkedIn, she's on social media, Merel Family Law, you know where to find us. But thank you for coming on. Assume we'll be doing this more, but anyone who is going through a tough time, whether it be domestic violence, a difficult marriage, just a tough time, they could reach out to Kristina. You could reach out to us. We'll connect you with Kristina. But thank you for coming on. And I think that's a wrap.